Hello, I'd like to tell you about a book I've been reading recently. It's by Tim Keller and it's called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. And the reason I want to tell you about this book is because in this he's telling us about a problem that I think loads of us have as Christians, which is how we think of ourselves. And Tim Keller's saying that really most of us have one or the other thing. We're either quite proud, we think more of ourselves than we should, or we quite struggle with low self-esteem and thinking less of ourselves. And Tim Keller's saying that actually they're coming from the same thing. They're coming from the way that our hearts aren't changed yet by the grace of God, the way our hearts aren't as they should be. I'd just like to read a bit from the beginning of the book. He says, "What are the marks of a heart that has been radically changed by the grace of God? If we trust in Christ, what should our hearts be like? It is not simply a matter of morally virtuous behaviour. It's quite possible to do all sorts of morally virtuous things when our hearts are filled with fear, with pride, or with a desire for power." In other words, he's saying that we can't actually change our pride or our low self-esteem just by trying to do things in a different way. It's got to go deeper. It's got to be something about our hearts that changes. And Tim Keller wants to point out that that's actually something that the grace of God does for us. When we understand more about the grace of God, we understand more about what it means to have a healthy sense of self-esteem. And that's what the book's about, the freedom of self-forgetfulness. He looks at 1 Corinthians 3 and talks about how Paul resists this attempt to either think of himself too much or too little, by not thinking of himself at all, by being self-forgetful. And he points out that Paul uses the language of an ego that's either too small or too big, being kind of distended. It feels painful. And that's what it's like for loads of us. That's what it feels like for me sometimes. It's painful. It doesn't fit right. But the solution isn't to kind of buoy ourselves up with making a list of all the ways that we're great, but it's to forget ourselves because of the gospel. This is what he said. "The essence of gospel humility is not thinking more of myself or thinking less of myself. It is thinking of myself less." And I think that's a really helpful way to think about this whole issue, thinking of myself less. And that frees us up to give us the opportunity to think about others, to think about God and what he might want for us. So that's why I want to recommend this book to you. It's Timothy Keller's The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. It's available from our bookstall or from any online bookstall. And I'd love to talk to you about it if you do read it and find it helpful. It should only take you about half an hour to read. As you can see, it's very small. So, I'd recommend that you pick it up and read it today. Thank you.